Hello folks. Here in Scotland it doesn't rain every day. I mean, sometimes it goes days on end without raining. But for the rest of the time we appreciate waterproof watches. So in this video I want to have a look at what makes a watch waterproof and what it means on the dial when you see a waterproof rating. Let's dive in. Hopefully a water resistant watch will survive a short duke in a glass of water. In the past, watches were sometimes described as waterproof, but the International Organisation for Standardisation has forbidden the use of this term. We'll come to that in a minute. Water resistance is covered by ISO, not iOS for some Apple related reason, 2281, but it's a tale of two standards. It was introduced in 1990 and tested the watch in various ways, but to static pressure, the rated pressure, for 10 minutes plus or minus a minute. To let you see what static pressure is, we need to go diving. Watches are put together in the atmosphere, which is miles of air above, so as a pressure. We don't feel it because the pressure inside us, and for that matter inside the watch, equals the external pressure. It's a lot actually, 14 pounds per square inch. If our diver goes down 10 metres, the pressure shown by the arrows on this diagram is plus 1 atmosphere. So that's an extra 14 psi more than at the surface. Notice though that the arrows are all the same size all around him, because the pressure, the static pressure, is equal from all directions. The pressure increase is caused by the weight of the water above. We go down to 20 metres and the pressure from all sides is now plus 2 atmospheres. Further down to 100 metres, the big arrows show that the pressure is now plus 10 atmospheres. Now that's the same pressure all round, and that's 10 times atmospheric pressure trying to force water into your watch. This increase in pressure is where we get our water resistance ratings from. As you can imagine, a watch that's rated to keep the water out at 30 metres or 3 atmospheres might not be able to handle 100 metres, which is 10 atmospheres. But here is the thing, ISO 2281 1990 doesn't rate the watch if you move it at the rated depth. Push your arm through the water, like for example when you swim, you push the seals against the pressure, effectively increasing the pressure on the side being forced through the water. That's dynamic pressure. Proportionally speaking, the increase in dynamic pressure that you can push your arm through the water is quite significant at a watch that's only rated to 30 metres water resistant, but much less so for a watch that's rated deeper to 100 or 200 metres. Essentially, this is the reason why when your watch is only rated to 30 metres water resistance, you're not advised to swim with it, even though on the surface of a swimming pool you're not going anywhere near 30 metres deep in the water. In 2010, the ISO was changed to cover all activities up to the specified depth, thereby now accounting for dynamic pressure. Now that would appear to suggest that since 2010 you can swim with a 30 metre water resistant watch. But can you? Can you really? Now any watchmaker in a country that recognises the International Organisation for Standardisation will face very stiff penalties if they rate their watches without committing to the ISO testing regime. Actually, that's not true at all. There is no enforcement of the ISO standards. ISOs are voluntary and compliance with them is voluntary as well. You might consider that manufacturers are quite happy to ignore intellectual property rights and copy other people's designs might not have much of a scruple about putting an erroneous and completely fictitious water resistance rating on their watch. We should have a little look at what things actually make a watch waterproof to see whether you can make this decision for yourself. Most of the most waterproof watches use a system where the case back screws into the case with a thread there. You can see these little indentations on your case back, and that's to allow the tool to actually apply pressure to screw the thing against it. Now, The thread itself provides a degree of water resistance, but most of the water resistance comes from this little component here, which is a rubber O-ring seal, which goes round there, and as the case back is screwed into the case, compresses this, and the rubber fills up all the little tiny gaps round about there, making a watertight seal. Now with the crown of the watch, you have a similar situation. Screw-in crowns. Most waterproof watches have screw-in crowns. Most 200 metre water resistant watches have screw-in crowns. And the crown here has a thread on it, and there's another gasket or seal, whatever you want to call it, inside the crown, which screws down and compacts against this bit here, creating a watertight seal. Now it's the pressure of the thread providing, as you screw the thread in, it's that pressure that compresses the seal, and it's the compression of the seal which fills up all the little spaces. Now when you're talking about water getting into a watch, you have to remember at the molecular level, the little molecules of water are very small. So very tiny gaps can let water into your watch. And it's not only liquid water you have to consider as well. Water vapour itself can get into your watch. So having these seals in good condition is a really important issue. Now, as a watch gets older, these seals can deteriorate over time. They can become brittle. Sometimes even as the case back is being screwed into the case, a little kink can form, which would make a little gap that would allow water in. Wouldn't be a perfect seal. That's something to think about. Now, where water could get into a watch, it's not through the steel itself. Water or water vapour can't get through stainless steel, or even alloy, whatever the case is made of. But it can get through any little tiny gap. And where you would get gaps would be round the edge of the case back. That would be round here, which is supposed to be protected by this seal here, through the crown and stem here, or round about the crystal itself. This old Invicta watch case doesn't have a crystal in it, but if you can see there is a seal round there which the crystal gets pushed into and is supposed to seal the face of the watch. Interestingly enough, the crystal in this watch got smashed, and that let water in, and very quickly water vapour formed outside the watch, and you spotted it straight away as soon as you go into cold weather. So that's a potential source of ingress for water, as is round the edge of the case back itself, but also your exhibition case backs here, because that just creates another seal, which is another potential source of failure. So the most waterproof watches are unlikely to have an exhibition case back on them. Now this watch was water resistant to 200 metres, and whether it was or it wasn't, they chose to have an exhibition case back. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever have an exhibition case back on a waterproof watch. Just be aware it's an additional potential source of failure. If you're seeking to have faith in your watch's waterproofness, there are certain design elements that you should look into that affect this. One of the things is pushers on a watch. Now this Skimei Digital is supposedly rated to 50 metres of water resistant. Go on, I dare you. For the first thing, it has a screw-in case back, which relies on the gasket, if there is a gasket, to be perfectly seated and in really good condition for the screws on the corner to push in. The other thing is pushers on a watch. You'll have noticed on Daytonas and things like that, the pushers on the stopwatch, the chronograph, screw in. That's to make them nice and watertight. They have their own seals inside them. If you have a water resistant watch, say a G-Shock or something like that, don't operate the pushers while you're underwater, because that's an extra source of potential catastrophic failure as far as the waterproofing is concerned. Another thing is mechanical tolerances mean that it's much easier to make a waterproof watch with a round face and a round case back. Rectangular or square cases, you have to rely on the tolerances being absolutely perfect all the way around the crystal and all the way around the case back. And this one shows you another source of problems. Case backs, press-in case backs. Press-in case backs are inherently less secure. Even though the water pressure pushes the case back in against the seal, it's not as good as a screw thread holding the case back against the seal, against the watch. That sandwich is what gives you your water resistant. And just pushing, something you can just push in by hand, is never going to be as tight, as safe a seal. Another thing is, this watch, along with a number of very expensive watches, has a case back that screws on a little bit like the Skimei Digital. Again, the pressure's there, but there's a whole space in the middle where the gasket's not being held under tension, relying on the tensile strength, if you like, of the case back itself to actually hold it all firm. That creates a design issue where there's a possibility that you might get water ingress with a case back like this. Also, that's 4 threaded holes, which are 4 extra potential sources of water ingress. This watch also has, obviously, a rectangular crystal. Even manufacturers that are compliant with the ISO standards only do sample testing, so there is a chance that your watch left the factory with a problem, perhaps related to one of those prior issues I talked about, which should stop it from being waterproof. If you want to swim with your watch, I would suggest 100 metres of water resistance from a respectable manufacturer, and I don't think you'll go far wrong if it's ISO compliant. Don't make the mistake of thinking that water resistance is always a mark of quality. This exquisitely made Patek Philippe Calatrava is rated to 30 metres of water resistance and costs nearly £30,000. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even learned something. I want to leave you with a bad joke. Once upon a time, a tourist asked a little boy in Glasgow, "Does it ever stop raining here?" And the little boy replied, "I don't know, I'm only 5. I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.